voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power of a single
conversation.
It could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I bring my last.
Good afternoon to everyone tuning in with us. Hello, I am Awesome General Cruz, live here from Rockford, Illinois. And joining me to our talk today is one of my close friends. There in, I know it's in Michigan, but I'm pretty sure that's not Sterling Heights today.
No, not in Sterling Heights today. I'm actually in Farmington. Excuse me, not Farmington. It's just pronounced Farmington. Farmington Hills, Michigan, but still in Michigan. And glad to be here with the real background. I promise this is real. It is very real.
I would say even the background sound is real.
Oh, you can hear. You can really hear, huh? It's
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
crickets, probably. Yeah. Like,
We can hear we can hear. Well, I don't want to say crickets. We can hear the nature. But, thank you for joining me in today's conversation, as well as everyone there in our team live chat. You probably saw the title. We are going to be talking about narrative perspective. I think it's another word, and I think a word you said, Tony, before we started the show was self-talk. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. How you see yourself affects how you talk to yourself, and in turn, it affects a lot of other things. I don't want to spoil you guys yet from the conversation. So Tony, I'll ask you now, like, how would you define perspective? And actually, let me add a little bit to it. How do you think it relates to your self-talk or your narrative?
how would I define perspective? So, I feel like before I would have defined it more simply as the way you see things, or the way that you kind of your mindset. But a lot of what I've realized too is that it's not just, I guess, based off of what you think, but even your experiences. Your experiences can influence your perspective on the way you think things would normally happen, or like an example would be if, like, when you're younger and um, you touch a glass of or I'm not a glass, let's say you touch a mug of, a drink, like it could be coffee, but you don't know that's coffee, and you touch it and it's hot. You might think that the only ever time you see that mug, it's always going to be hot. So that's something that you kind of just stick with, and that becomes your perspective on that mug with something in it. But that's not always the case, right? Sometimes you might have a cold drink in a mug, and it. So that's kind of what I think of perspective. That it's a way of seeing things, but it comes from a lot of different influences and a lot of different aspects of our life.
Okay. So, how would you say that your perspective then, since you brought up, how would you say your perspective has affected the way that you see, like, yourself, maybe from like a past experience you
Um, the way that I see myself, we're really getting into it so so early in the show. Um, how has how has perspective affected the way that I see myself?
had?
Well,
Maybe from like an experience that you've had in the past, or uh, yeah, like how has it affected the way that you see yourself?
uh, I won't speak on everything, but an example, I guess, that I could give is possibly how other people react to me. So the way that I think of myself could be dependent on different interactions that I've had with people, whether they're friends, whether they're strangers.
Mhm.
Like if people don't react to me a way that I think they will, that might make me think one way about myself. Like if people, if I like tell a joke to a set of people and I think the joke is really funny, but they don't think it's funny, then in my mind I'm like, oh, I'm probably not funny. But that might not necessarily be the case, right? Sometimes you might
Mhm.
just need a different audience. So that's kind of what a lighter example I would say in terms of how perspective has influenced the way that I see myself, the way that I think of myself.
Mhm. No, I laugh because I feel like I'm similar in the way that, um, not to say that I'm sensitive, but like when if someone yells at me, it like alters like how I see them for a bit, where I might be more cautious around them the next time I see them. And it's not that I'm like, it's not like I'm blaming them like entirely. Yeah, it's also there's also that part of me that goes, oh, I didn't I didn't read the room right, or I probably, like you said, I'm probably bad at jokes. Probably bad at jokes. That's why they didn't laugh. They got angry at me. There's still that way of like maybe, I would say from my past experiences. There's too many of them to like really mention one by one. From my past experiences, I know that uh, that's how it affected me, in a way where, because of those experiences, this is how I perceive that action, right? Of someone yelling at me, it's that, oh, like I probably did something wrong, but sometimes it's not that. Sometimes someone's just having a bad day, right? They're just having a bad day. Uh, like they just happen to reach a breaking point when you were the one while you were talking to them. You know, so I would say, yeah, like that's a way that it affects, right? How you see yourself, how you not face your problems, but how you perceive situations. How you perceive situations now, it's affected in that way. And I just want to ask, this did it also affect, like the past experience? Did it also affect the way that you talk to yourself?
Always,
How so?
always. I said it that way to buy myself time, just because it's a very what we're talking about is a very vulnerable thing, and it's why it's conversations that matter, right? Because it's something that may not necessarily be comfortable. Um, so can you repeat the question one more time?
Like, how has your perspective thing, since we've been talking about, we talk about like how we see ourselves from our past experiences. It affects the way we see ourselves when we're put like in situations like, that example I gave was like, if someone yells at me, I react this way, probably because of like my past experiences. That past experiences I've had led me to kind of develop that sort of mindset to this reaction to a situation. So how, like, would you say it affects the way you talk to yourself, like how it affects the way you talk to yourself, kind of?
I would say it. The older that I got, I I became more aware of what I was saying to myself, or if not what I was saying, what I started to believe about myself. Um, when you're younger, I don't know that it bothers you that much, or that you think about it too much, because when you're younger, you're a little bit more, it's a little bit more fresh, you're kind of carefree. But I guess as you get older and you become more self-aware, and you start to interact with more people, and you see how other people are, and maybe you start, you know, creating those comparisons in your head, for sure, that dialogue starts to crank up a little bit more. And I would say that I felt the self-talk be at its peak probably in my late teens and early 20s. I would say that was the most intense that I was, I guess, that harsh on myself in terms of if in terms of self-talk.
Mhm.
Um, not that I wasn't a positive person or that I didn't think I could do anything, but um, I didn't have a good. I'll put it this way. I think, and I say this to a lot of my friends. I think sometimes that the way that my mind was before, it was a lot worse than other people think of me. I think I always thought that other people thought better of me than I thought I was as an individual. I'll put it that way.
I honestly, I think that applies to a lot of people where we might see ourselves, especially if you're like, I categorize those now, those self talk into like two things: the critic and the coach.
Mm, yeah,
So
good word.
the critic tells you, the critic's the one that tells you, why try to do this? You can't do this. But the coach is like, it's gonna be hard, but you try to do it still. So I categorize it to those. But like sometimes when the like just talking percentages, when the percentage of the critic is like uh it's like a lot larger than the percentage of like the coach, it's gonna be hard to see yourself as well in a positive light, and we might try to do our best, like in terms of our actions we do our best, and that it does lead to people seeing us better than we see ourselves, because we always, I would say, speaking from my own experience, like it's me uh trying to be better than how I think of myself, but also still thinking that I'm not as like that I'm not as good as how other people see me.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it has, I guess, a little bit of benefit of like pushing me to be better, but in terms of mindset, it's not. I would say it's not really the best mindset to keep myself in. To keep myself in that. Uh, in a way, it's pressuring yourself to like uh work harder, but maybe not so good on your end. It's like I'm struggling a little bit to put it into to cohesive words, but do you kind of get where I'm like going with that?
I what I'm realizing as we're talking about this is that it's difficult because this is all things that happen internally,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of hard to verbalize the process of speaking on it objectively, I guess. That idea of thinking about the way that we talk about ourselves and thinking about the way that we perceive ourselves, because it's not really a conscious thing until you get yourself to self reflect, and then you start to realize like, oh, is that the thought that I'm having? I guess that is the thought that I'm having about myself at the moment. Like like also I'm trying to think of a more lighter example, like when you're playing basketball or when you're playing some kind of sport,
Mhm.
and sometimes the default comment that you might make, you may not say it out aloud, but in your head you might say something like, oh, you suck, or oh, why did you do that, or you start to, you have this commentary that just comes out.
Mhm.
Sometimes it might not be intentional, but it just happens. But maybe like what we've said, it's a result of just past experiences that we've gone through, where we started to build up this perspective that we have about ourselves.
Mhm.
And it's hard, I would say it's hard to talk about just because it's very personal. It's
Yeah.
very personal, and everyone has uh different things that they don't like about themselves. um which is, which speaks to the positive end of that, is that there's always room for improvement, of course. And we are very aware of of ourselves, and just being with ourselves all the time versus other people. It's just, you're very close, you're very close to these things. So I think that's what makes it difficult.
It's funny that you brought up like basketball as an example, because like I noticed that it also applies to me in that regard, where like I have the ball, I'm about to I'm about to to shoot, and then I stop myself because I think, oh, you're not gonna make this. like
You're shaken out.
it's like when someone, like, you try to shoot and then someone just just yells something and you get distracted for a little bit. That's what happens to me. Like every time I try to shoot, it's like, oh, you're not gonna make this. You're like, oh, like the basket's like too far. You're not gonna make it. You're not gonna make that no, that shot. And it distracts me for a little bit, where I actually don't end up making the shot, or I don't even like throw the ball. I just like put it down because I, oh, like I probably need to get closer. Probably need to get closer. I'm not good enough to make this shot, or like when I'm running and I like I like almost strip. Like my head starts to think of like the what if I tripped, that would have been so embarrassing. Or did anyone notice that I stumbled there? Like, and it distracts me. It takes me out of the moment. I would say it takes me out of the moment of like not just experiencing but also giving my best in that moment, because I'm stuck in my mind thinking of like the how it could have gone wrong, or how it could still like go wrong. And I would say it even affects the way, or not the way, it affects the things that I allow myself to try. It affects the things that, or the opportunities that I allow myself to take. You know, because I don't play a lot of basketball because that's how I am when I play basketball. Like sometimes I'll be mentally absent while I'm playing, or I'll I'll have like second thoughts, like before I make a decision or before I make a move, I'll have like second thoughts of like, this might not go, this might not go well. You're not good enough to pull that off, you know.
Or if not second thoughts, you kind of talk yourself out of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Sometimes you end up talking yourself out of stuff like, oh, maybe never mind. Let's not do this. I don't feel comfortable. I don't think.
Trying to shoot the basket, and they're like, oh, you know what? No, no, I'm not good enough to do that. You know, I talked myself. I might have been able to make it if I tried, but I wouldn't know now because I didn't. I didn't even allow myself to give it a try. Right. So how would you like for you? Do you think, or like, would you say from like your experiences that it affected like the opportunities you also allowed yourself to take, or even just the things you allowed yourself to try?
Yes. Again, I will say always. Always. Because um, I guess the manifestation of that self talk and that perception of the way that I saw myself, the way that we see ourselves, it also translates into to expectations, right? Expectations of ourselves, it can go, I think, the opposite way too. Of we might have this perception of ourselves where we like I really struggle with asking for help. So sometimes like that expectation that I have of myself is just like, oh, I need to do it all on my own. I need to be able to figure this out all on my own, right? And not ask help, or not look like, because I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want to you know give anyone else reason to go through something hard with me, right? When in reality we know that's not true. A lot of the perception, or a lot of the stuff that we think about, or the things that we convince ourselves, it's really up here and in your mind. And you have to be careful to be able to separate like what is true and what is just stuff that you're thinking. Because there are times where like what you mentioned before, that opportunity will present itself, and it will go one of two ways. I'll either talk myself out of that opportunity, saying that I don't think you should try that because you don't have the qualities, or you don't have the what it takes to get there.
Mhm.
And then the opposite end of that is like you take it on, but then you put on so much expectations of yourself, in the sense that everything has to be perfect, because if it's not perfect, then it means you failed, right? We have like this way um of kind of looking at a situation where it has to be the way that we envisioned it, or it has to look like the way we thought it out in our head, because if it doesn't, then it means I didn't do well. And I've experienced that in a lot of different projects. And feeling what makes it worse is when you can feel that others are depending on you, and you feel like you didn't deliver, or you feel like you let them down. And that's a very tough feeling to cope up with, because now it's not just you feeling bad, you're thinking that, you know, other people are feeling bad on your behalf, which again, I want to say and reiterate that it's not necessarily true, because you also have to, what helps is to ask, right? Like actually asking, as opposed to going back to that word of narrative. What story are you creating in your head? What story are you creating there that is influenced by this perspective that you have of yourself? Is it really, is it really like that? Or are you just thinking yourself into that because you look at yourself negatively? Like I feel like it's also in a more lighter example, it's like what you said earlier. You run into someone and you're like, oh hey, it's like, let's say it's an old friend that you're passing by, and then you're like, oh hey, and then that person, as soon as they see you, like they just give you a look, and then they, you know, they walk away. But you start to think like, oh, did I do something wrong? Which is normal, right? I feel like that's a normal reaction to do. But just because that interaction happens, it's not necessarily because of something you did all the time. But the problem with the self-talk, the problem with the narrative, is that sometimes we can convince ourselves that that's reality, that that's true. It's not.
I did something wrong, or like I probably said something to them, like
Overthinking is what it is. Yeah,
you know,
it's
that
overthinking.
they're avoiding me now. Yeah, the like you said, overthinking, right? Overthinking of like the that simple like interaction, and actually, just in terms of like when we're talking about like the opportunities that we allow ourselves to take, is that there like oftentimes I found myself also not even giving it a try, because of like how I like the with the example that you brought up, it reminded me of like a project that I worked on that a lot of people were telling me it's good. You know, they were like they were telling me I did like really well on it. They were telling me the final product was like it was really good. You know, the event was memorable for them. The event that I like organized, you know, was really memorable for them. But like at the time, I couldn't even see it that way, because all I saw were the problems. All I saw were the things that I didn't get to do to make it more perfect, more perfect in like in this view of like how I saw it, like how I saw the event happening. You know, when every single thing that didn't go as planned, I blamed on myself for it not going to plan. But you know, like a lot of them weren't. I wouldn't say uh, wasn't my fault. Wasn't the isn't the right word. It was out of my control. Like a lot of the things that went wrong was it was out of my control, because I couldn't have predicted that could happen, right? So like it, again, I wasn't even uh, allowing myself to 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 celebrate it with them. You know, like I even I would say this. I even avoided like people because I felt so embarrassed about like how like about the final product that I delivered. But they were telling me that they enjoyed it. They were telling me that it was good. Uh, but in my mind, I was just like, how how was it good? This and this went wrong. We weren't able to do this because I forgot to and I forgot to prepare this ahead of time, right? Um, and again, it's in a way you can think of it as like, oh, it pushes me to do better, but also there's a healthier way to do that, to shift in a way to shift your perspective, right? It's a healthier way to do that. So let's actually talk about that a little bit, shifting our perspective, right? Like for you, maybe you've noticed, like the things we've been talking about like earlier, the way that we talk to ourselves from like our past experiences, like how you manage to first identify like which parts of like your self-talk that you needed to change, and how did you manage to change that perspective?
My default answer is reflection, but I'll detail that a little bit more because reflection can happen in a lot of different scenarios, depending on, I guess, what you're comfortable with and what works for you. The most extreme, I would say, is to actually sit with yourself because, and I'm not generalizing, this is not necessarily for everyone, but from what I've just observed, I'll just say in myself, the tendency a lot of the time is to distract myself when stuff is bothering me, right? Which is normal. Like sometimes that just helps us cope, helps us to take a step back. But what I've noticed is that when I don't actually deal with it, when I don't actually deal with the issue and kind of face it head on and be real with myself in the way that, yeah, you did feel that way. Like you kind of, I don't know how you can do it, but sometimes you end up lying to yourself a little bit in that way. Like you end up denying things, and but if you allow yourself to really sit with it and kind of listen to what your head is saying, and it takes a lot of work. I'm not saying that's easy. It's something that's a constant practice and something that we always talk about meditation, like when we're meditating and we have our conversations with God. That
Mhm.
helps me a lot because I'll notice when I'm talking to God and I have these observations or I have these feelings, and then I'll realize like, oh, I guess I didn't realize I felt that way until I verbalized it. Now that brings me to my next point, that if you aren't able to do it on your own, what helps is to have people that you trust that know you. It doesn't matter how long you've known them, but if they know you in the way that they can be real with you and in your strengths and your weaknesses, it helps a lot. Because I had a conversation, I don't know how long ago that was. It was sometime this year, and I would look back on it every now and again just because I realized something about myself when I was reading it. That that idea of what perception that I had of me, and I was listening to, because these are people who love me, right? But they're also not afraid to be honest with me
Mm.
and to tell me how it is. And being able to hear one of them say that, you know, I don't know why you're, I'm paraphrasing, but the gist of it was, I don't know why you're talking like this because you work hard. And I think I needed to hear that because for a long time, I didn't think that that's what I was doing. And that's the problem with self-talk that is negative, or that you just, you aren't able to keep in check because it skews what your reality is.
Like
Like,
you take one break and the mind just goes, oh, you're not being productive, right?
yeah. And it helps to have, those reassurances. I always talk about that. I always try to include that in my prayers, that I get reassurances, and God delivers. He always finds a way to let me know that, hey, you're doing okay, or you're doing better than you think you are, just by what, it'll be a conversation with someone that I have. It'll be, a result of something, because prior to that, maybe I was just, the negative talk was just getting so bad that, I was like really stressed out and I was struggling. It it's important to be able to do that kind of reflection, um, of course with God, right? The first one that I mentioned earlier, but it helps to do that with people who love you too, because of their love for you, you will be able to have the best of both worlds. Of, they will tell you how it is, in what they see that you can improve on, in what they see that you can stop, but they also will still encourage you and tell you your strengths as well, so that you have both of those, kind of coming together, as opposed to when you're in your head, you only have one extreme. It's the one extreme of, I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing enough. So I really appreciate, and it's not something that has to happen all the time, but it does help to have deep and real conversations like that, because then you can move forward a little bit better. And ever since that conversation, I felt braver to do more things, because in my mind it was like, you know what, someone believes in me, someone believes in what I can do, before I even believed in myself.
Mhm.
And I think about my mom, and I think about a lot of people that do that for me in my life, and we pray for those things, and God delivers. He sends those reassurances. So I don't remember what the original question was, but I hope that it was answered in what I
No,
said.
it was. The question was about like shifting, like how you manage to shift your perspective. And I do get the first thing that you mentioned earlier, where I get that little bit of a struggle when you're self-reflecting, of like uh separating what's true versus, like what's in your mind, that like this is how you see yourself. It's hard to separate that from the two. It might be possible if you were if you were a machine, which we are not. So it's hard for us to separate that emotion, right, from the reality, because there's always that lingering feeling of, what if I'm wrong, right? Like, what if I'm wrong? Like, I want to think better of myself, but what if I'm wrong? So like, I don't know, I like what you said about asking other people for their perspective. I would say, like, there was an experience, I've had recently, where I would say the first thought is like, why did I put myself in this situation? Why didn't I just listen to the people telling me, like, you're getting ahead of yourself? Why didn't I just listen to them? You know, and at the moment, like, I'm blaming myself. Like, why didn't you just listen to people? See, this is what happens if you start just thinking for yourself. you know but now, like, after like a little bit of reflection, I see now why it happened. Like, I see God's part in it, in the way that He allowed me to put myself in that situation, so that I learned the lesson of, listen to people. you know, you might have something that you want. You might have something that you think you need to have to be something, but it might not be the time yet. And that became painfully clear to me. Like, when I was already in that situation, oh, I am not ready for this. I pushed myself to be here because I think this is what I need to be better. This is what I need to improve, but I'm not ready yet, you know. And that's what God was showing me at the time. That, like that now, uh, like I'm, telling myself when someone says something, especially to my parents, when they tell me something, consider it seriously, you know, like not don't it's in terms of don't have that tunnel vision of like this is what I need, like if I have this, then I can talk to myself a little bit better, if I had this, I'll be more confident, I'll be different if I have this, but it wasn't the time yet, and that experience, God allowed me to have that experience so that I learn now. And even in those moments where I was being taught that lesson of listen to people, especially the people who are concerned about you, while I was learning that lesson, there was also that encouragement from the very people that are I'm talking to, where it's also in the same way where they brought up a perspective, like the way they see me that I didn't see myself, you know, because I always saw, I would say I always only saw what I was doing wrong, but I didn't realize that people were seeing what I was doing right, you know. So my own perspective was just seeing I failed at this, I made this mistake, and like there's nothing to be proud about myself. But then people who, I would give a shout out to my mom because she was one of those people who, like, mentioned to me, like how proud they are of me for even trying, for wanting to be better, and there was a lot of like other things too that she mentioned that I didn't even like thought to think about, you know, um, that when they brought it up to me, it like made me think of like uh, how little I was seeing of myself, how little I was seeing of myself um, that I closed out this entire section of of my actions because I was honed in on this, this thing that uh, I failed at, or this, like the things that I still see that I need to change. I was honed in on that, and I didn't even see the progress I had already made. I didn't even see the right things that I did. I only saw the mistakes. So it really helps to have that perspective. And then when you're praying, right, you have that moment of like where you're able to be like really vulnerable. I would say even more vulnerable than I am when I'm talking to myself. Where uh, there are some things that come up only when I'm praying, and then like that happens to also be the time when like I realize how it makes me feel. How those situations make me feel. So it's really important to have that different perspective, right? Not just be locked in on this feeling of I'm not good enough, so I have to like work really hard to be better, right? Which is good. It's good that you want to be better, but the way you see yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, like really matters in that regard, right? So I just want to. Sorry, let me just compose myself a little bit. So, in terms of when we've shifted our perspective, now that we're here, we managed to make that shift, to make that change in the way that we see ourselves. You're it's right there. You're on a roll, right? uh, how do you maintain it? Like, how do you keep yourself in that mindset of not letting the not letting the emotion dictate the way you talk to yourself.
Because it comes at a cost, EJ. It comes at a cost if you don't. Especially like for the younger ones, it's really hard to grow up in the world that we live in today.
Mm.
Because if you don't keep your self-talk in check, you could lose yourself to other things. Like being able to I- I'll just cite another example is like that idea of acceptance, of being accepted by um, different kinds of people, right? Being able to have that self-talk is not just about the way that you perceive yourself, but also thinking about the kind of person that you want to be, the kind of person that you aspire to be, and then moving in a way that will align with that. And the why there of why we do it is so that we can be the best Christian that we can be. Because self-talk, it can result in a lot of different things, right? Like one of the things that I just mentioned is like you can lose yourself to other things that don't align with your values because you thought that you had to do all these other things in order to be accepted by people, but in the end, inside you're like, oh, but this doesn't align with what my values are, with what's important to me,
Mm.
with what I believe as a Christian. Having self-talk can influence the way that you move in the world, in your goals, in anything that you take an action
Mm.
on. And I'm not speaking for everybody. Of course, when we're speaking on this stuff, we're just speaking on our experiences. You don't want to reach a point where your self-talk becomes so intense that you just give up. You give up on changing, you give up on you give up on yourself,
Mm.
right? Because you might end up resorting to a place of, oh, so and so said that I'm like this, so and so said like this, so that means that I will never be able to become this kind of person. But as Christians, what we believe is that as long as we have the life that we've been given, that's an opportunity for us to always strive for more, to strive for change. Even if in the past there might be things that we may hold on to because we think that I can't believe that I did that. But that doesn't have to be the only thing that you are. Because the more that you move forward, the more that you distance yourself from that, the more you're adding on about how you can strive better and move past that. Because I think that's what a lot of it is sometimes. Like when we're in our self talk, we're stuck in the past. We're stuck in things that we were dissatisfied with, that we didn't like outcomes of. And in order to move forward truly, not just in time, we have to be able to be accepting of those things and figure out how we're going to change. Because only then will your self-talk be able to change. If you continuously tell yourself, oh, I'm like this, I'm someone who's always late. I'll just use that as a simple example.
Mm.
If that's all that you define yourself as, then you will always be late. But if you tell yourself, I'm a person that wants to be early, not even on time, that will be early, won't you kind of in your mind hold yourself accountable to that word because you want to make good of your word? So the way that we talk to ourselves and about ourselves, I'm not saying it's easy, because as someone who has struggled so much from that idea of being a self-critic to the point of inaction, to the point of lost opportunities, It's tough. And it's not a way to live, because in that way, it's almost as if you don't trust in what God can do for you,
Mm-hmm.
because you're so focused on your own limitations. And we're always taught that. We're always taught to not just rely on ourselves. We're always taught to believe in what God can do for us, because he can do anything. So even when outcomes don't happen the way that you want them to, even when situations don't pan out or turn out the way that you want them to, you keep moving. And that movement will build the confidence that you need, that you hold on to reassure yourself that God is there. So your self talk can make or break you, and that will always be up to you. It's a choice, right? Because you can be passive about it and just let it happen uncontrolled as it does. You can keep telling yourself, oh, I'm dumb. Oh, I'll never be able to get that 4.0. I can't. Or even just simply saying, I can't. I can't do it. Have you tried? After you tried, did you try again? Did you have your prayers? And then again, if it doesn't work out, ask for guidance, ask for reassurances so that you can keep moving. Because if we get stuck in those things and attach ourselves to the results of those things, of whatever it may be, it could be people's opinions, it could be whatever it is, we'll never shout out to level up. We will never be able to level up. The next level you, I was shouting out the show. So, and I saw out to Pauline. I saw Pauline in the chat earlier. That was something that revolved around the topic in Faith and Melody yesterday. She was mentioning about the way that we talk to ourselves and being kind to ourselves. It's not in a way of you're ignoring the things that you did wrong. That's not what I'm saying. It's not being like oblivious or in denial, but it's one way to say like, you suck. You
Mm-hmm.
sucked at that. Why did you even try? Versus, you know what, you didn't do it the way that you sought to, but you could still try again, right? Those are two different things. The second one is just more cautious and more intentional about what you're actually going to say, as opposed to it just being like critical for the sake of being critical because it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to.
It's like, you failed, that's it, no more tries. Right? Or like what you said of like, well, I'm not able, I wasn't able to do it that one time, so that must mean that I won't be able to do it like anymore. Like, or like, not anymore, but I won't be able to do it as well if I try and I try and I try. You know, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know unless you try it again, right? And I like what other folk put there in the chat about like taking inventory of all the good things about yourself, in that same way of like also not neglecting the progress that you've made with each try, right? Because you might just, like, even when you are trying and trying again, you're giving yourself that you're telling yourself to try and try and try, but it might not work out. It might not work out still, but you still have to log in the progress that you're making. You know, don't don't what's the term to use? Like, don't take out the value from that progress that you made, because there's still value in that progress. Like you wouldn't see how much closer you are getting to the goal that you've set yourself, you know if you're not logging the progress that you're making, because you might be thinking, I'm still here, like, this is the goal, I'm still here. But what you don't know, you're already like here, you're like 75% of the way there. And you're not seeing it because you're just seeing how you failed, right? So it's also important to log their your progress, right? It helps, at least in the motivation part of like maintaining. that mindset of this is the change I want to make in myself. Like I said, I want to wake up early. Uh, you know, depends on what you count as early. Let's say 7:30 is early, 7:30 and early, and you always wake up at like 11. So you're like, I want to wake up earlier. So you wake up, maybe this week you wake up at 10. Next week you woke up at like 9. Then the next at 8. You're slowly getting there. You're getting there. But in those 3 weeks, if all you're telling yourself is like, oh, I'm still not able to do it. Like you just make it harder on yourself to reach that goal. Because again, you're not acknowledging that you are getting better at it, right? And you answered a little bit already the why on why we should change, or why make the shift in our perspective, right? We kind of answered that already. So, just looping back on the uh, previous question, the first one, like how, like when you made that shift in your perspective, how has it changed the way you talk to yourself?
I'm more patient now. I'm a lot more patient in the sense of what I expect of myself. I'm a lot more patient in the sense of giving myself opportunity as opposed to shutting myself down right away.
Mhm.
Um, and it's also improved, I think, not just the way that I talk to myself, but the way that I show up in different situations. Because when you don't have good self talk, it affects a lot of different aspects of your life that you wouldn't expect. It could be your relationships, it could be how you do your job, how you perform at school for the younger ones. If you don't have good self talk, it changes the way that you think other people think about you. And that could result in a loss of opportunities and all of those different things. But when you have good self talk, it gives you that confidence and that bravery to show up the best that you possibly can. And that's what we always want for ourselves is to be that best version of ourselves in anything. So I'll reiterate what I said, in the live chat section yesterday of Faith and Melody. If we're going to talk about narrative and the story that we tell ourselves, the story that I try to, well, it's not just a story. It's what I believe to be true in terms of my faith is that no matter what, no matter what ends up happening, if I make mistake, I'll try again. And the stuff that I do right, I'll still keep going. I'll still try again because what I want out of every outcome is that God will be enough. And when I say that, I don't know if people like I don't know if it comes across the way that I wanted to, but when I say that God is enough, it means that in every outcome, whatever may happen to me, I'll be okay because God is enough. And that's the kind of faith that I want to carry forward with me, that I can get back up. I'll jump back up. I will be braver to take opportunities, to take chances, to not be afraid, even though I may be anxious. I may feel these different things. I might think that I'm not qualified. I might think that I'm not good enough. In my mind, I want to tell myself that God is enough so that I can enter any situation knowing that God is there to back me up. So that's the self talk that I try to have with myself now, is that God is enough. And that has become like my why for everything of of how I'll show up in everything that I do, so that I won't stop myself. that I won't talk myself out of out of doing things. But because that's our belief as Christians, right? That everything with God is possible. So that's what I try to tell myself, that if I might feel this way about myself, I know that I have God. So that's what will carry me through. And I also just want to mention what Joy put in the live chat. It's in Tagalog. She said, "Malayo pa, pero malayo na." So it's basically like, if you think about it, it's like where you want to reach may still be far, but what you've also gone through and what you've also overcome is also far as well. And it's important for us to think about that and reflect on that, because that also gives us encouragement, even if we don't get it from others, because you won't always get it from other people. And we shouldn't depend on that, but we should depend on that confidence that if we've made it through this far, it means God is looking after us and there's more for us to do. So be brave to do it. Like, take those opportunities. It may not look the way that you think it's going to look, but God is there. God is enough.
Really, I want to thank you for sharing. Not just like your perspective, but that last point of like mentioning of like aligning it, like in a way, right? In a way, be it to be it that you didn't meet the expectations you set, or that you did meet the expectations set. It's still, like doing, um, still doing your best, still giving it a try. And like I said, whatever the result happens, or whatever outcome, it ends up being. Like I said, God is enough. So thank you for Anna. Thank you for sharing um, your thoughts, with me today in this conversation. Uh, I would say this is like definitely a conversation, that's close to my heart, a topic that's close to my heart. And I hope that our team live chat there as well, maybe you picked up something from this conversation, or even just enjoyed, uh, the conversation. We definitely enjoyed seeing your comments there. I know I didn't really get to reply there in chat, but I've been reading them. Every time you see me like looking this way, that's that's me reading your answers in our chat. And we do hope that you continue to join us, for many more conversations that matter. We do hope to see you next week. Um, Again, Tom, thank you for joining me. Thank you to our team live chat for joining us as well here in our conversation. We do hope to see you again next week here on INCRadio Chatline. Let's continue to have conversations that matter. Thank you, everyone. See you again.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I bring my last.
This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.